Okay, guys, so we're going to take a look at the responses to the reading questions for Act 2, Scene 1 here. Just going to briefly flip the screen so that you can see it the right way around. Now, the first question in Act 2, Scene 1 is how does Montano's language reveal the esteem in which Othello is held in military circles? So we're focusing on these lines here, 35 to 39. Pray heaven he be, for I have served him, and the man commands like a full soldier. Let's to the seaside home, as well to see the vessel that's come in, as to throw out our eyes for brave Othello, even till we make the main, and the aerial blue an indistinct regard. So again, he invokes this language of spirituality to begin his celebration of Othello's arrival, and actually in this case his hope that he will be safe and that he will arrive through the storm that has decimated the Turkish fleet. For I have served him, and the man commands like a full soldier. Now, in these lines here we have this kind of militaristic vocab, serving, commanding, and like a full soldier. He is a soldier that is seen as having both, intellectual capacities and experience, and that Montano has been under his command, and he celebrates both his powers of leadership and his actual combat experience, and this is important, and this is the reason why he is so esteemed. His final lines, I think, take this to an extra level of kind of figurative intensity, as he says, to throw out our eyes for brave Othello. And we're talking here about looking out into the sea. We're going to stay and look at the sea to ensure that he arrives safely long enough for our eyes actually to become impaired and damaged almost, even till we make the main and the aerial blue an indistinct regard. So we're talking about the sea and the sky until the sea and the sky become blurred. They have an indistinct difference until they become one. So the sense of longing here, of throwing out our eyes, gives us the sense of eager anticipation with which Othello's arrival is greeted by those in Cyprus, and the esteem that he is held in military circles. Question 2. How does Cassios' description reveal the unrealistic and abstract way Cassio and others view Desdemona, almost as an allegorical embodiment of virtue from morality plays? So we're looking at lines 61 to 62. He's describing, Montano asks Cassio, good lieutenant, is your general wife? Does he have a wife? And Cassio says, most fortunately, he hath achieved a maid that paragons description and wild fame, one that excels the quirks of blazoning pens, and in the essential vesture of creation does tire the ingener. So we've got here this extremely hyperbolic celebration of Desdemona's both her beauty and her virtue. He has achieved a maid. He has secured himself a maid, and this verb is not a coincidence. That it's seen as something worthy of celebration, that he has secured himself a wife as worthy as Desdemona. That paragon's description, again, this is an example of anthemeria, where Shakespeare takes the verb, the noun, paragon, an idealized embodiment of something, and turned it into a verb. So it's paragon's description. She is idealized beyond words and wild fame. Even uncontrollable and wild fame is beyond a suitable description for her kind of positive qualities. And one that excels the quirks of blazoning pens. One that actually is beyond the unusual phrases and celebrations of writers, of pens that blazon, that identify specific positive features of families usually and celebrate them. So she excels these unusual descriptions of the pens of writers that blazon individuals and families with positive traits. And this final section, and in the essential vesture of creation does tire the ingener. So we have here this highly kind of elaborate celebration of her essential positive qualities that I think is in many ways what gives us the idea that she is an abstraction herself, an embodiment of virtue. When she says in the essential vesture of creation, in the essential kind of features of creation, in the essential qualities of creation, she tires the ingenious, the person who invents them, because she is actually so far beyond the qualities of normality that she actually shows herself to be a kind of idealization. So she, at one point, there is also within this an ambiguity that the phrase does tire the ingenious. So she, in this sense, her own natural excellence exhausts and adorns anyone contriving praise. So this is overly courtly and elaborate in this language that Cassio uses. So the phrase itself, in essential vestures, her natural excellence does tire the ingenious, exhausts anyone contriving praise. So she's beyond, her essential excellence is beyond anyone's ability to capture in language, is the essential point that he's making. But what is revealing also about Cassio is his overtly kind of courtly language that he uses, and that as the play progresses, Iago latches onto and undermines. And the third question: how does Cassio's use of personification here further this virtuous and abstract representation of Desdemona? He describes what might happen on the sea as they bring her to Cyprus. He's had most favourable and happy speed. We're talking about the passage of Othello's journey. Tempests themselves, high seas and howling winds, the guttered rocks and congregated sands, traitors enscarped to clog the guiltless keel, as having sense of beauty, do omit their mortal natures, letting go safely by the divine Desdemona. So, in these lines here, we have storms themselves, high seas and howling winds, have the guttered rocks and congregated sands, traitors enscarped. Now, what we're seeing in this particular line is I've actually imprisoned these dangerous features of the sea, the guttered rocks and congregated sands that could pose some kind of threat to the boat. The storms themselves have imprisoned these dangerous features to stop them from clogging the guiltless keel. So the rocks, the storms themselves have actually prevented these rocks from clogging the guiltless keel, clogging the sinless boat on which she is transported here. So the nautical environment is personified as actually preventing damage to Desdemona's boat here. They have turned these guttered rocks and congregated sands into traitors enscarped, because they have a sense of beauty, because of their commitment to her idealized beauty. They prevent this damage and ensure her safe arrival. They do omit their mortal natures, letting go safely by the divine Desdemona. Their mortal natures means, their threat to mortality, their dangerousness. They omit these dangerous qualities because they have a sense of beauty that prevents them from wanting to threaten the boat on which Desdemona is carried. So again, this is this overtly courtly language that Cassio uses, and that in many ways borrows similar qualities of the abstractions that Othello constantly makes use of in his oration throughout the play. And that this personification is of the nautical environment and the dangers within it. It gives us a sense of that extreme idealization that they use to understand Desdemona's character. So again, she is just as much of an abstraction as some of the ideas like nobility and virtue and honesty that we see undermined throughout the play. Further down, what is unusual, and this is question 4, what is unusual about the effect that Cassio describes that will result from Othello and Desdemona's physical union upon arrival in Cyprus? He says, "Great Jove, Othello guard, and swell his sail with thine own powerful breath, that he may bless this bay with his tall ship, make love's quick pants in Desdemona's arms, give renewed fire to our extincted spirits, and bring all Cyprus comfort." So this is extreme hyperbole again. The great Jove, this kind of god, this Roman god, is going to guard Othello, it's going to protect him, and swell his sail with his powerful breath. He's going to drive Othello safely to the island, so that Othello may bless this bay with his tall ship. So again, we have this sense of Othello's presence almost being sacrosanct. It's like a blessing to the island itself, because of his reputation in the military and the esteem that he is held in. So this is, again, blending those sense of reputation and esteem with the idea of sanctity. He may bless the bay with his tall ship and make love's quick pants in Desdemona's arms. So we're talking here about, the sexual fulfillment of the marriage, the consummation of their relationship, that people are fully aware has not yet, had an opportunity to be acted out yet by the couple. The unusual thing is that this is going to give renewed fire to our extincted spirits and bring all Cyprus comfort, that somehow the consummation of their relationship through the sexual act is going to in some way revitalize, give renewed fire to the extincted spirits of those on the island and bring them comfort. So their relationship is not only idealized as individuals, but the effects of their relationship on the population that Othello has been entrusted to protect is also vast and unrealistic and idealized. Question 5 is about class. Now, there's a kind of an awkward sense of class tension between Iago and Cassio, obviously, that builds into the tension between the two characters throughout the text. Cassios says, greeting Desdemona, "Welcome, mistress. Let it not gore your patience, good Iago, that I extend my manners. 'Tis my breeding that gives me this bold show of courtesy." Sorry, this is to Emilia, Iago's wife, not Desdemona. So here, the modern paraphrase of this would be, "Welcome, mistress. Don't let it irritate your sense of patience, good Iago, that I display my courtly manners and my, by virtue, class. It is my breeding, it is my status in society and my family history that allows me to make this bold show of politeness." So not only is he kind of being over familiar with Iago's wife here, but in the act of doing so, he overtly and explicitly displays his sense of class superiority, that he extends his manners, and this is a word invested with class connotations that reinforce the class superiority between Cassio and Iago. And obviously that builds the sense of resentment on Iago's part, because that is partly what he suspects is the reason for his being overlooked for the position, the lieutenantship. "It is my breeding that gives me this bold show of courtesy," though it's my superior family line and the manners that I have derived from that allows me to be bold with your wife. So my socio-economic superiority drives the need for me to display my overt politeness in a kind of slightly free and perhaps extreme way towards his wife. So there's a sense of resentment here. Iago, however, as we see in these lines, responds in a kind of a fairly brutal way. He says, "Sir, would she give you so much of her lips as of her tongue she oft bestows on me?" So he very deliberately borrows these kind of, erotically suggestive phrases. "I wish she would give you so much of her lips. I wish she would kiss you so much as she gives her tongue that she oft bestows on me." So there's a sort of sexual one-upmanship about these lines that somehow Iago's, well, yeah, you may get a kiss, but I get the tongue. There's a kind of crude sexual connotation to this. But actually what he means here is, "I wish she would give you as much of her lips as the constant nagging that she constantly bestows upon me." Her tongue, he means, the verbal chastisement and harassment, really, that Emilia constantly inflicts upon him, supposedly, although we can obviously understand why that might be, because Iago is unpleasant. So we have that real strong sense here of Iago refusing to be kind of bested by Cassio in the kind of sexual connotations, but also undermining his wife with this deliberately hostile kind of female stereotype. He goes on here with this theme. He says, what flaw does Iago accuse Emilia of possessing here? 100 to 101. This is obviously that she is a nag and that she is free with her criticism. Question 8. Where does Iago accuse Emilia of the following here? Shirking her domestic duties, playing down her offence caused to others, being hostile herself when offended, neglecting her sexual duties, being deceptively compliant in public, creating domestic havoc and chaos. So there's a number, we can see there's a kind of litany of offences that he seems to enjoy criticising her for. And he says this further down. In faith, too much, I find it still when I have list to sleep. Marry, before your ladyship, I grant she puts her tongue a little in her heart and shides with thinking. Here, we're talking about, even when she's not speaking, she's telling you off with her thoughts. She shides you with thinking. So she puts her tongue in her heart. These parts of the body become metonyms for speaking and feeling. She puts her desire to speak into her heart and criticizes you and tells you off with her thoughts. You have little cause to say so. And Iago says, come on. You are pictures out of doors. So here, there's this kind of deceptive sense of compliance in public. I'm a picture of compliance and politeness in public. I'm but bells in your parlours and wildcats in your kitchens. Here, obviously, there's this sense of creating domestic havoc and chaos. Ringing a bell inside a parlour is to create a sense of chaos, and bringing wildcats into the kitchen. She's not respecting her domestic duties and is bringing chaos to them. Saints in your injuries, devils being offended, players in your housewifery, and housewives in your bed. So saints in your injuries here is, when being kind of offended by others, falsely enacting a sense of kind of saintliness. So showing everyone else that she has this kind of saintly, idealized quality. Devils being offended here is, being hostile herself when offended, so actually exposing an element of hypocrisy. Players in your housewifery. So here, actually shirking her domestic duties, being an actor in your domestic duties, your housewifery, and housewives in your beds. And then when you are required to be sexual, you neglect the sexual duty with the act of a housewife. So there's this enormous sense of misogynistic limitation in his criticism of Emilia here. Sorry, that we have a picture of his idealized femininity that involves being publicly polite to your husband, attending upon him domestically, being, controlling your sense of hostility towards him, even if it's, has a just cause, being sexually compliant. All of these things are ideas that he uses to criticize his own wife here. Looking at lines 121 and 122, it says, I am not merry, but I do beguile the thing I am by seeming otherwise. How do these lines connect with Iago's character? Desdemona here, in an aside, and frankly admits that she's not happy, probably to be in Cyprus and to be surrounded by this kind of military context. But I do beguile the thing I am. I do present a false picture of my authentic emotional state by seeming otherwise. Obviously, this is the exact description of what Othello, of Iago's behaviour throughout the play. He beguiles the thing he is by seeming otherwise. He tricks us into thinking that he is good, honest Iago, as Othello later calls him, by acting out the role of a virtuous kind of reverential subordinate in the army to Othello and a friend to everyone else. So the key point to take from this is that Desdemona's self-deception and the deception of others here is starkly contrasted to Iago's because it's underpinned by a moral concern and a sense of virtue. So it's not necessarily that this trait of dissemblance is a kind of morally bankrupt way of behaving. But what I think the play exposes is the danger of this personality trait when it is freed from the anchor of morality. What happens when you take this ability that humans have to dissemble and unmoor it from its moral anchor? You take it away from its sense of morality, and that's what we see embodied in Iago. Okay.